Beth.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Um, I absolutely love The Passenger, so thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Um, can you just briefly explain in your own words what it's about and then how you came to be the director?
Yeah, so I described The Passenger as a coming of age hostage road trip thriller, which is like a pretty specific uh niche. Um, and I came on board. I had made a film with Blumhouse prior to this called Midnight Kiss for their series of films that they did for Hulu. And it was a really good experience, and we really enjoyed working together. And we had talked about doing something else. And one of these movies, they had an opening at the very last movies of this slate, this group of films that they were making for their streaming deal. And um, they said they had sent me a script or two scripts actually that I wasn't crazy about. And so I sort of asked, I was like, would it be okay if I went out and found a script? And if it's someone that you love and something that I love, like that we could maybe explore that. And so I went to Jack Stanley, who wrote the script, and was like, what, who I had read his stuff before and really liked. And I was like, do you have anything that fits within this world? Like, where, we need to have, there can't be like aliens invading Earth and huge, like gigantic, but like it has to fit within the scope. And he pulled out The Passenger, which was kind of a perfect fit.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, what was it like going to Blumhouse and saying, I don't like what you sent me?
If it was the first time that I was working with them, I might have been a little scared. I was like, might have been a little more uneasy, but I think because I understand, like, okay, a film means you spend a year and a half more with it. And so as a director, like, if you're not on board 1,000%, you don't, you want to like stay away. And even though there was elements that were good, like it was too close to the start of production, I think, to get the scripts to where they needed to be. But like, I mean, I think at the end of the day, they probably respected that because I had a strong opinion, and I, you know, wasn't afraid to share it. And I think that that's something that directors, that's a quality that probably comes in handy for directors, to make sure that your vision stays intact.
I mean, hey, I like it as long as you're happy with the
Yeah,
end product. It's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So when reading the script for The Passenger, do you remember what your first impression was and what really excited you about bringing it to life?
Yeah. So I mean, I just remember the first time I read it, I was like, I had no idea where it was going. And because I didn't really have any context for it. Like I hadn't read a log line. I hadn't, like, no one had said like, oh, this is this. I was reading it blind, and I found myself so excited by all the turns that it takes. But then sort of halfway through, I was like really starting to root for Benson, who's Kyle Gallner's character. And I was like, oh, I feel weird about this. Like, I'm rooting for like who is kind of the bad guy, and I kind of want him to be okay. And like, and then I was like, I was seeing a little bit of myself in Randy, and I was like, as a high school kid who just wants to like disappear and not cause any, not get picked on, not, sort of cause any waves. And I was kind of like, I wish that like Benson had come along and like kidnap, like, I mean, it's so weird to say it, but like I was wishing that like, oh, that would have been like a wish fulfillment, like in high school, to have something like this happen that was like, you know someone who was forcing me to kind of step out of my shell in a way that never would have happened if it hadn't been for them. So it was that, and that like moment of sort of, yes, understanding Benson does horrible things, but at the same time, like, I can't help but kind of fall for him and root for him as a character. um that was like, okay, this is interesting. This is like not something you see in a lot of stories, you know and the fact that they, that relationship ends up becoming so sort of mutually in a weird, messed up way, good for both of them. Had the circumstances been like a little bit different.
No, watching it, I felt the same way about halfway through. I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel weird.
Yes, exactly. I love that. Yeah, I'm glad that that comes across, because that's exactly what I felt.
Oh, for sure it did. And you mentioned that you at times had felt like Randy. And I was kind of thinking that too. Like I couldn't relate directly to Benson and Randy, but I felt like them.
Yeah.
And that feeling came across and was very relatable. So I'm glad to see that that kind of came across in your direction. Was that an active choice to bring your feelings into this, or was it something that just kind of happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to bring as a director, you always have to bring your feeling, you have to find yourself in the story, and you can't help but identify with, or find a way to identify with almost all the characters. Um, but like for me, Randy and sort of who I was in high school, you know, I wanted to disappear just as badly as Randy wants to disappear. And just to like avoid, bullying or being picked on, and I think that what Johnny Birchall does so beautifully is he gives us this Randy that like is in a lot of ways like a blank slate that we can project ourselves onto. And because Randy spends so much time listening to Benson, and sort of, you know, he's he's a passive participant in the story for a lot of the time, and it becomes really easy for audiences to kind of find a little bit of themselves in his struggle, and also just like, dealing with your old shit, or dealing with stuff that you're hanging on to, that you know left to your own devices, you just tuck it away and sort of ignore it. And I think everyone can relate to that for sure, or most of us probably.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so all that being said, with how relatable the characters in the story is there anything that you hope people take away?
I mean, I hope that people take away the fact that, Benson as a character, I mean, yes, he does something really horrible, but he's more than that horrible action. Like, he is a person that has a past and has baggage and has trauma, and he is struggling to deal with all of that just as much as anybody else. And I think that, you know recognizing that in Benson, and sort of understanding like, okay, if perhaps if he had had the resources or the access, or um the ability to kind of get help that he needed from an early stage, like things could have been different. um and I'm of course talking about like the horrific thing that he does, but like, if people are able to, you know see or recognize something in Benson, in someone from their own life, and sort of realize like, oh, like maybe this person needs a little help, or maybe there's a way to help them deal with something that they're not dealing with. Um, but it's more than anything, it's just like that we're not defined by our actions in a way that makes us unforgivable or one note, if that makes sense.
It does, it does. Um, one thing that I thought was interesting, and you mentioned this earlier, is that Randy is like the passive character throughout all of this, and he spends most of his time listening to Benson. So with a story with the characters being unbalanced like that, did that pose a challenge to your direction to try to not force Randy into the spotlight more, but to
Yeah.
honor characters while keeping the dynamic true, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I mean, I think that was something that I was concerned, originally, like before we started shooting. I think that like as soon as we started shooting, and I realized, because we shot everything with two cameras for the most part, and whenever possible, we had, because there's a lot of scenes where it's like Benson and Randy in a car, like these long sort of intimate conversations. And so a lot of times there would be a camera on Randy and a camera on Benson. And I remember the first time that we shot one of those scenes and I was able to watch both of their faces, I was like, we're fine. Like I could watch Randy listen for 10 minutes and not get bored. What Johnny was sort of able to do with those moments was kind of inspiring and super exciting, because I was like, originally I was like, okay, how are we gonna, like, Benson's doing all the talking here, and how is that going to be interesting? But as soon as we started shooting, I was like, okay, Randy is though he might not be saying much vocally, like there's so much that he is conveying with his face and his eyes.
Oh, I agree. It was that they always say like the best acting is in the reacting, and with this film, like I really think that that is true.
100%. Yeah.
Um, I honestly don't know where I'm at with time. But when and where can we catch The Passenger?
Yeah, so The Passenger, it'll be on digital and on demand on August 4th, which is like all of the iTunes and Amazons and all the places you rent and buy movies. And then it'll go to MGM Plus later this year. I don't know the exact date, but August 4th is the drop date for the being able to watch it.
Awesome. And is there anything that we haven't touched on about The Passenger that you'd like to add?
Oh, I don't even know. Like, no. I mean, I think I really liked your questions. I think you asked really, so um I think that's good. I mean, unless there's something else you want to know, you want to ask me.
Not really. That was kind of all my questions. But I try not to ask the ones that I feel everyone asks. So
Yeah. Well, you didn't. You did a good job of avoiding those. So thank you. I appreciate that.
of course, of course. Um, but yeah, if that's all you have to say, again, thank you. I love the movie, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for helping to spread the word. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course.